For decades, the standard clinical model has treated cognitive decline as an isolated neurological failure, a localized breakdown happening strictly inside the skull. Traditional diagnostic tools like the KMMSE, the Korean Mini Mental State Examination, are explicitly designed around this assumption. They measure brain-specific cognitive output, like word recall and basic math, treating the brain as a closed system. But recent 10-year longitudinal data disrupts this entire model. The research proves that tracking cognitive decline by looking at the brain alone yields an incomplete and highly inaccurate predictive model. The progression from subjective cognitive decline, the phase where a patient first notices memory issues, to objective, measurable dementia, is heavily dictated by peripheral physiological systems. This introduces a new medical framework known as cognitive frailty. This model establishes that cognitive health is intrinsically tied to musculoskeletal strength and metabolic stability. By ignoring the physical phenotypes of aging, like how fast someone walks or how their body processes glucose, we miss the earliest, most actionable warning signs of dementia. To accurately predict and alter cognitive trajectories, clinicians must transition from isolated neurological screening to a multisystemic model that tracks physical and metabolic risk factors simultaneously, alongside memory tests. This chart plots cognitive impairment over a 10-year timeline, and it reveals a stark divergence in patient outcomes based entirely on physical health. The stable line tracks non-frail older adults, while the severely declining line represents those classified as physically frail or pre-frail. Physical pre-frailty accelerates the onset of objective dementia. Reaching this specific physical threshold drives a steep downward curve in cognitive function. This intersection has a precise clinical designation, motoric cognitive risk syndrome, or MCR. MCR is a pre-dementia condition characterized by subjective cognitive complaints paired with a measurable decrease in walking speed. Slow gait speed is a primary mechanical manifestation of neurological decline, rather than just an orthopedic issue or a standard sign of aging. When you combine this physical weakness, specifically low muscle mass, known as sarcopenia, with cognitive impairment, you get a diagnosis of cognitive sarcopenia, which shifts the clinical trajectory and complicates patient care. The clinical stakes for cognitive sarcopenia are severe. Patients with this dual diagnosis face a dramatic spike in all-cause mortality and cardiovascular-specific mortality compared to those with only one condition. To catch these dual conditions early, we have to look for mechanical warning signs in a patient's history, specifically a record of multiple falls. Experiencing multiple falls reliably predicts a twofold increased risk of developing incident MCR. These falls occur before actual dementia sets in, serving as a critical leading indicator. Those physical falls map directly to specific cognitive deficits. Data shows they correlate strongly with declines in episodic memory and processing speed attention. A patient's physical stability, their daily walking gait, and their hand grip strength are the earliest, most visible biomarkers of a failing cognitive infrastructure. This makes basic physical assessments mandatory for accurate neurological screening. Moving from the musculoskeletal system to the endocrine system, we find another massive systemic driver, the cumulative effects of impaired fasting glucose. To understand how glucose affects the brain, we have to look at the blood-brain barrier, or BBB. The BBB is a highly selective membrane that protects neural tissue. Type 2 diabetes and constant glycemic fluctuations bombard this barrier, causing the tightly packed cellular wall to become porous and structurally compromised. When the blood-brain barrier is compromised, toxins enter the neural environment. This structural damage directly increases the clinical risk of developing vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This neurodegenerative risk applies even to non-obese subjects who simply have impaired fasting glucose.
The metabolic dysfunction itself is the primary driver of the damage, independent of body weight. But this mechanism also offers a powerful counter-intervention. Manipulating the timing of metabolic processes can exert strong neuroprotective effects and help repair the damage. Regimens like prolonged nightly fasting and intermittent fasting, or IF, force the body to regulate insulin sensitivity and trigger cellular clearing, restoring healthy metabolic flow. We can see this in clinical trial data following older adults with self-reported memory decline who adhered to a strict 8-week prolonged nightly fasting regimen. This split-screen visualization shows the exact metabolic trade-off. Over those 8 weeks, systemic glucose and insulin levels drop on the left, while the right side tracks a corresponding quantifiable increase on the MAPS, or memory and attention phone screener, alongside a documented decrease in insomnia. There is a crucial caveat here. Time-restricted eating in strictly healthy volunteers with no cognitive complaints showed null effects on cognitive function. Fasting acts primarily as a therapeutic repair mechanism for those with existing metabolic or cognitive deficits, not as an enhancement for perfectly healthy brains. Ultimately, cognitive decline is heavily modulated by insulin sensitivity. This proves that metabolic timing and dietary interventions are valid, measurable tools for neuroprotection. Beyond internal physiology, the systemic risk model also includes sensory inputs and environmental confounding factors. Disrupted sleep architecture plays a major role. Markers of a weak circadian rhythm, specifically low amplitude and highly fragmented sleep, directly correlate with lower cognitive scores in older adults. While sleep disturbances alone do not independently predict dementia, they compound the effects of physical frailty, multiplying a patient's overall cognitive risk.
Sensory degradation acts as another accelerant, specifically untreated hearing loss in populations aged 65 and older. Untreated hearing loss actively forces the brain to reallocate resources, contributing to poor cognitive ability changes over time. This makes immediate audiology referrals a necessary step in cognitive care. Even the external environment matters, introducing the concept of cognitive capital. This refers to the built neighborhood environment surrounding a patient, factoring in their physical proximity to resources like museums, parks, and fitness centers. Living in a neighborhood with higher cognitive capital provides stimulating contexts that act as a baseline buffer, demonstrably delaying the onset of cognitive decline. A patient's sleep architecture, their sensory inputs, and even their zip code are active biological modulators. They will either buffer the brain or accelerate the systemic shift toward predementia. When we bring all these variables together, we construct a complete systemic risk topology. Cognitive decline sits at the center, heavily influenced by slow gait, sarcopenia, insulin resistance, fragmented sleep, hearing loss, and low cognitive capital. This map exposes a flaw in viewing memory loss. Subjective cognitive decline is not a one-way street to Alzheimer's. Through this systemic lens, pre-dementia syndromes are frequently non-progressive. These specific nodes are entirely reversible and actionable clinical targets. This creates a new clinical imperative for rehabilitation therapists and neurologists. Screening must be inherently holistic. Relying strictly on cognitive tests like the KMMSE is clinically insufficient if you aren't matching that data with physical and metabolic baselines. Routine sit-to-stand tests, detailed gait analysis, and fasting glucose panels must become non-negotiable components of standard cognitive screening. Identifying these systemic failures early provides a massive window of opportunity for precise, non-pharmacological interventions before permanent neural damage occurs. By treating cognitive decline as a multi-systemic architecture rather than an isolated brain failure, clinicians can actively rewrite the trajectory of human aging by using targeted exercise, metabolic timing, and environmental design.